Hello everyone, welcome to my Evil Within, Akumu difficulty, no upgrade/keys walkthrough, and this is chapter 13, Casualties. And this in my opinion is the creepiest level in the game because of the music, the narrow hallways, the choice of environment, and also the use of lighting. All of that together makes this chapter rather creepy, and I would almost call this chapter scarier than chapter 9 in all honesty. I just think the kind of environments they put you in feel a lot more intimidating compared to what Chapter 9 provides. And even though Rubik was a factor to consider with Chapter 9, I don't think his presence was enough to really warrant the chapter to actually be the scariest chapter in the game. But this chapter, I just feel very different about it. And it's the same case with Chapter 14. I definitely think Chapters 13 and 14 are pretty creepy chapters. Just the way they utilize the music and atmosphere and the placement of the enemies is perfect for the survival horror aspect. And for that reason, they come across as very intimidating chapters. And there is the Keeper. The Keeper is going to serve as the boss fight of this chapter, and then you will have to fight the Keeper again in a final boss encounter with him on Chapter 15, and you have to fight two of them, but it's actually very easy. Because if you have the resources necessary, you can do that final boss fight in seconds. But I'll not talk about it in this video, I'll talk about it when I get to Chapter 15. Let's just focus on what's happening right now. So, there's a wire trap right in front of me, and then there's this guy. I'm going to wait for this guy to turn around, and then I'm going to disarm the bear trap. You need a freeze bolt and a shock bolt for this section, and obviously you'll need matches to accommodate the shock bolts as well. There is a doppelganger to my left, and after I disable the trap, I'm going to move slowly so I don't get too close to the guy in front of me, and I'm going to use a freeze bolt on this guy. Then, I'm going to sneak kill this guy in front of me. And most of the enemies have guns on this section, so you have to do this stealthily. If you're skillful enough, you can probably sneak past this whole entire area without killing anyone. I just don't recommend it, because you'll miss out on a lot of trap parts. Chapter 13 gives you back so many trap parts. I think it gives you roughly 13 to 15 trap parts back. So you pretty much get a return on your investment if you've been crafting a lot of bolts. And that's exactly what this chapter is for. It's to help you restock on trap parts after you've been using them a lot in the earlier chapters. But this right here is very important. I used a bottle to lure those enemies to that part, and then I used my gun to lure them over here. I should have planted my shock bolt before luring them, because then I wouldn't be dilly-dallying so much, but it still worked out in the end. And all four of those enemies are dead, and we only have to deal with 3 enemies now. Once those 4 enemies are dead, there's going to be a guy that spawns behind you, and he has a crossbow, so you of course want to do this stealthily. I'm going to sit in this spot, and I'm going to wait until he starts pathing down the hallway that the first guy used. Then when he's in the right spot, I'm going to get behind him and sneak kill him. Then for the next 2 enemies, the strategy is very simple. In fact, there's actually a new enemy type that only exists within Chapter 13, and it is the Suicide Bomber. So in total, there are 4 Suicide Bombers on Chapter 13, and you only have to deal with 2 of them. One of the Suicide Bombers is in this room right now. This Suicide Bomber and the second one that you have to deal with are both munching on corpses. So, what I'm going to do to deal with the 2 enemies left in this room is I'm going to shoot the Suicide Bomber. That will attract the attention of the other guy, and then he's going to investigate, and then when he decides to go back to his default position, I'm just going to sneak kill him, and that will be the end of this whole entire encounter. So, the Suicide Bomber is to my right. The guy who has the gun is down that hallway there, but he can't see me. So I kill the Suicide Bomber, and then this guy comes to investigate. I'm just going to wait for him to turn around, and then I'm going to sneak kill him. And that is the end of really the only big encounter in Chapter 13 where you have to deal with a lot of enemies. Then the other big encounters are just the kitchen area and the fight with the Keeper. The fight with the Keeper is the hardest part of Chapter 13, but it's not hard because it's difficult. It's hard because you have to deal with this one circular trap that spawns in the boss fight after you kill the Keeper the first time. And it's random where the circular trap will spawn, and it spawns from 4 different spots. And if you leave that trap active, it becomes very hard to focus all of your attention on the Keeper. And the trap goes down from 1 shot with a shotgun, but it moves around a lot, and when you factor in the random spawning of the circular trap in that particular boss fight, it can prove to be a nuisance. Thankfully, on this recording, that was not the case. While the trap did spawn from a very unfavorable position, I was able to deal with it rather easily, because it went in the right direction for me to actually hit it with the shotgun. But I'll get to that fight once I get to it. Right now, I'm just going to search this whole entire room for traps to disarm, And on Chapter 13, there's actually a unique trap that it introduces, and it is the acid trap, which is what I'm going to be disarming right here. If you go underneath that sprayer, the acid will just land on top of you, and it will instantly kill you, regardless of difficulty. And on the kitchen sequence, there is actually an acid trap that you have to disarm if you want to leave the kitchen area. And because of how long it takes to disarm the trap, it can open you up to being attacked by the circular traps, so you have to use your shock bolts intelligently to make sure that the traps don't get any opportunity to hit you. And speaking of traps, we have just obtained 9 trap parts from that one room, and we are about to get an additional 4 traps from this room. So 13 trap parts from 2 rooms that are close to each other. How cool is that? And by the way, this right here is a unique method for luring the haunted that only works on this part of the game. I just turned on my lantern, and he saw the lantern light, so he's coming to investigate. And because of the fact that I have the perfect place to hide that allows me to close the distance on him very quickly, without him spotting me, I'm going to be able to sneak kill this guy very easily. And in the room he's in right now, there is actually a keeper. And you have to actually look at the keeper in order to make him go away. And the spot you have to go to has a trap in the way. And if you trigger the trap, it will trigger an alarm, and the keeper will start coming after you. And you can obviously tell by the number of safes in this room why you do not want him to spot you, because he will respawn a lot, and it takes so long to disarm the acid trap that you don't have enough time to get away from him. But I see him now, and he is going to go away. I don't know if he responds to noise, or if he actually responds to you if you get close to him, since he's kind of in a preset animation. But I obviously didn't want to see what would happen. I'm just going to collect the traps in this room, and I'm going to make my move. And correction, I actually collect 5 traps in this room. So you get 14 traps back in total from these 2 rooms. And you'll get even more traps back in the next couple of rooms. So by the end of Chapter 13, you're going to be able to stock up on so many trap parts. And the amount of options at your disposal when it comes to the bolts you're going to be crafting, it's going to be a lot. But I'm now disarming this acid trap. And we have a bit of a hiatus before we have to deal with any enemies. So, I have an announcement to make. There's going to be a demo for Resident Evil 3 Remake releasing tomorrow, and I'm going to definitely live stream it. I don't know if the demo is going to be a timed demo, just like with the Resident Evil 2 Remake demo. The whole idea of a timed demo to me is so stupid. I don't know why the developers decided to put that kind of restriction on the Resident Evil 2 Remake demo the first time it released, and they eventually removed this restriction from a later Resident Evil 2 Remake demo. But still though, why encourage such a practice? The whole point of demos is to help you learn the game, to help you understand the kind of game the developers are trying to make, and to help you feel hyped for the game before it releases. Because I had to waste so much time trying to find unconventional ways of replaying the Resident Evil 2 Remake demo, my interests for the game weren't remaining in check. So, by the time I got to the game, I just wasn't feeling as hyped for it. Not that it would have mattered anyway, because Resident Evil 2 Remake was a very disappointing game. But can you imagine if the Resident Evil 7 demo had a time restriction on it? I remember back when I played the very first demo of Resident Evil 7 and not liking it, and then when they released a new demo, I started to actually like the game a lot more, and I got to replay that demo so many times to understand the game a lot more. By replaying the demo so many times, I was able to learn how to dodge the molded, and I was able to understand the kind of direction that the developers were going to take with Resident Evil 7, and because of that, I was feeling so hyped for Resident Evil 7. They made such a big mistake with putting that time restriction on the demo for Resident Evil 2 Remake, and if they reintroduce that kind of restriction for the Resident Evil 3 Remake demo, I'm going to be so mad. But I guess the inclusion of the timer for the Resident Evil 2 Remake demo clearly showed the kind of mentalities that Capcom had when they were designing Resident Evil 2 Remake, and I expressed so many times in my walkthrough of Resident Evil 2 Remake that the mentalities of the developers who made that game were clearly misplaced. And they just didn't feel like the kind of mentality a Resident Evil developer should have. And that's why Resident Evil 2 Remake was very disappointing. But this is the kitchen area, and at the beginning, there is the possibility that you can get rid of 2 of these circular traps, but I'm only able to get rid of 1 before I decide to move forward. And the kitchen area is a very dangerous section. There are a lot of different traps in this area that you've got to watch out for. A couple of the traps you got to watch out for are the fire traps, spike traps that come from the ceiling, and these wire traps that will spawn more circular traps if you trip them. So you have to make sure you disarm them. To avoid the spike traps, you have to stay close to the stoves, and if any of these circular traps get near you, make sure you're shooting them with the shotgun. On this sequence, there is a unique type of circular trap. This type of circular trap has a bomb on top of it, and when it gets near you, it has a proximity sensor that hones in on your location, so it'll start to beep, and it'll start to move towards you. And the best way to deal with that particular trap is to use a shock bolt, because it only seems to spawn when you get to the final part of the kitchen sequence, which is before the acid trap. Watch out for the spikes right there, that's very dangerous. And then go ahead and disarm this trap, and watch out for the fire trap. Before I move to a particular threshold of the room, I'm going to make sure I destroy this trap. I'm going to plant a shock bolt right over there. And the moment I trip the spawn, one of the traps will be destroyed by the shock bolt, and the explosive trap will be active. If the explosive trap gets destroyed by the shock bolt, you're in luck, because then you'll be able to pick up the shock bolt that's inside this final part of the kitchen sequence. If it doesn't get destroyed, you have to proceed with a bit of caution to pick up that shock bolt, but on this recording, I just choose to run away, because I didn't want to run the gambit with that particular trap. But that is the end of the kitchen sequence, and I'm going to now make my way over to where the keeper is. And if you have explosives such as grenades and explosive bolts, you will be able to stun the keeper very easily. I didn't have any grenades, so I'm going to have to craft an additional 2 explosive bolts in order to do this boss fight. You have to kill the keeper at least 3 times before the dumbwaiter actually appears. And the best way to kill the keeper is to stun him with the explosive bolt, and then finish him off with the pistol or the shotgun. When it comes to using the explosive bolts, I find it better to just plant the explosive bolt on the ground and let the keeper walk over it. Shooting him directly with the explosive bolts is very tricky because of all the meat hanging in the way. And the fight is about to begin right now. So, plant an explosive bolt in that spot over there. Just make sure it's not too close to you, otherwise the explosive damage will kill you. And this is going to stun the keeper right now, and it's going to take either 5 or 6 shots to finish this guy off. Every time I use the grenades, it always takes 5 shots to finish this guy off. With the explosive bolts, it's different, because the explosive bolts do less damage than the grenades. But the trap has spawned right now, and the trap has spawned in a very bad position, but thankfully it spawns right there, and I can just destroy it with the shotgun very easily. And I'm going to make sure I destroy the barbed wire traps, and fun fact, you can actually trap the keeper in his own barbed wire traps if you shoot the trap at just the right moment. It isn't really that beneficial of a feature, but it's still cool nonetheless. And right there, the keeper did not get stunned by the explosive bolt. That's why I recommend using the grenades instead of the explosive bolts if you have them, because the grenades will always stun this guy. The explosive bolts at times don't stun this guy. But either way, it's still very easy to get away from him. And the keeper is dead, and now we have to finish him off one last time before the dumbwaiter appears. And with that circular trap out of the way, killing this guy is going to be very easy. And he always spawns near you, so you can use his behavior to your advantage by standing on that side of the room and then coming over to this side of the room. You have plenty of time to plant an explosive bolt so that he can get stunned by it. And he has been stunned by the explosive bolt, and now I am just going to finish this guy off. And once he has been finished off, and I get inside the dumbwaiter, the chapter is practically over. You just have a bit of a downtime to just pick up some stuff from a couple of crates, but on this recording, I don't really get anything from the crates, and I only pick up that one trap part. It doesn't really matter in the long run if I get anything out of these crates or not, because I'm going to be able to do chapters 14 and 15 easily without wasting too much ammo. And you might be thinking, well, the Quell boss fight in chapter 14 requires a lot of ammo, and you have the Gauntlet fight and the Keeper boss fight on chapter 15 that might potentially drain you of a lot of ammo. Well, that's not true at all, because for the Quell, I'm just going to be using the Magnum and the Shock Bolts, and then for the Gauntlet fight, I'm going to be using mainly Shock Bolts, and then for the Keeper boss fight, I'm going to be mainly using grenades and explosive bolts. So, I'm not using up a lot of ammo in the long run anyway. So, when you witness my strategies for chapters 14 and 15, you're going to really find them to be very helpful. But that is the end of chapter 13. Stay tuned for the future chapters. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.